My name is Jenelle Esparza. I am a multimedia or a mixed media artist originally from Corpus Christi, Texas. My main focus these days is weaving and working with fiber arts, but I also kind of dabble in some sculptural elements with some found objects mixed with natural fibers. And I also use old, kind of outdated tools as sculptural objects as well.
So tell me a little bit about growing up and at what point, and have you always been into weaving, or how has your art changed over time, and when did you know that you were like, hey, I am an artist, or this is what I want to do?
It's a little bit complicated because I didn't realize that you could be an artist until I started going to college. And I've had lots of artistic people in my life, my father, my grandmother, lots of aunts and uncles who are really talented and crafty and like to make and create things out of found objects and things. Or my father can draw really well and taught me how to use a camera for the first time. I never really considered it as an actual profession until I went to college. So, and that was at Del Mar College in Corpus Christi. All of my professors were artists, and once I kind of figured out that you could study art, I just suddenly was like, well, I'm an artist. Like, that's it. That's all I want to do. And that kind of created this trajectory into what I do now. Yeah.
And so what went from just a studying of the arts to honing in on getting more into the textiles and into weaving?
So I started weaving in around 2017, 2018. And prior to that, I had a really strong focus in photography and kind of this image-based art. I went to school and got my bachelor's, my BFA in photography. I went to UTSA, which is what brought me to San Antonio. And I was really drawn to photography because of my dad teaching me how to use a 35 millimeter camera. And I'm still very, very drawn to photography, and I still use my camera, but it's mostly as a kind of a study practice, documenting things around me, documenting people and textures and places, and a lot of that, sometimes the feeling of an image could end up in a weaving, or the texture of something, or a pattern that I might have noticed somewhere might end up in a weaving. But I originally started weaving in 2017 to learn how to weave for a residency that I had received, and I was due for the following summer in 2018. My practice had grown really conceptual. I had been kind of moving away from photography because it wasn't enough to kind of tell the story that I wanted to tell. So I started moving into other medium. I was using bronze casting, some glass, and I was working with other artists and artisans to do some of that, or I was going to a local craft center to learn how to do the process myself and make a lot of the work. And so I had started around 2012 or so researching my family's history and getting really intrigued with what I was finding. Mostly, I knew my family's history growing up. I knew that my grandmother picked cotton, and my aunts and uncles also did the same. And I grew up just around miles and miles of cotton fields every summer my whole life. And I never connected it to this larger sort of national and even international story around the fiber of cotton, the history of cotton. And then I was really just honestly surprised by realizing my family's connection to it, the Latino heritage connection to it, and this like the interconnected story that was there this whole time. And I never knew that growing up. I always thought it was maybe just me. So realizing later on that it was not just me, it was my neighbors, my classmates, everybody's history was tied to it. And I really wanted to know why. So my art practice started really digging into that research. I did a lot of reading. I visited a lot of libraries. I did a lot of interviewing with my grandmother before she passed. And it started to change my art process because the still images were beautiful and lovely, and I thought very impactful. But I wanted to kind of tell the stories of all these aspects to the history that I was learning about. And so it took me into like paper making and using the cotton fiber and the plant in different ways to kind of tell different stories. And so I started like pulling the fiber apart and picking out the seeds and pulling out the cotton fiber and separating it from the plant or the spur that's left afterwards. And even keeping like the seeds and the stems and the dirt that would fall off. And just messing around and seeing what I could do with that and what could be told with that. And it brought me to weaving eventually. So in 2017, I really wanted to use the cotton fiber in a way that would talk about like the physical aspects of that type of labor that my family went through. And a friend of mine had told me, she was in the residency with me, her name is Zoe Charlton. She's a fantastic artist. And she told me about this study called epigenetics, which is a study of your genetic history, almost like a genetic memory, where like you pass down traits, genetic traits through your DNA. But the study of epigenetics goes over passing down an experience or perhaps even a memory linked, maybe even memories linked to trauma through your DNA as well. And so that really kind of got me thinking about labor history and like the body's memory, the body's ability to hold memory in different ways, and how we kind of pass that trait on. So for me, I wanted to do something in that residency that was really physical, that I used my body and my own labor to produce. And weaving made the most sense because working on a loom, you are working with all four limbs, you're working with both sides of your brain, you're very creative, but you're also very analytical, and you're keeping track of yarn threads and pattern making and stuff. And so it's very physically and mentally exhausting after a while. But I was really interested in that aspect of it. And then of course I could use the cotton fiber in that way through weaving as well. So I took a class in 2017, learned how to weave. And then during the residency, it was at Art Pace here in San Antonio, Texas, the summer of 2018. And I produced the first weavings that I had ever made during that residency. And I didn't intend to continue weaving after that. It wasn't my intention. My practice had been kind of like taking on a different practice or a process for the conceptual aspect of a project. And then I would just kind of like, okay, that was that. And then I would, move on to something else. But for weaving, for some reason, I was just very, very drawn to the practice. I really enjoy it to this day. I started conceptualizing all of my projects in fiber, and I really enjoyed the vendors that I found. I found the Stony Hill Fiber Arts and Sally Fox Fiber Yarns. Sally Fox makes those naturally colored organic fibers. And then Stony Hill Fiber Arts distributes them, but Stony Hill Fiber Arts also has a cotton yarn in different weights that is grown in Texas and then ginned and spun in, I believe, the Carolinas. And so the fact that the cotton is grown in Texas really is important to me conceptually, because a lot of my work is talking about Texas cotton, Texas history, and my family's connection to it. So because of all of that, and because of this kind of like strange familiarity with the process that kind of happened unexpectedly but very naturally, I just started weaving since then, and all of my work has been weaving.
What do you listen to, or do you listen to anything while you're working?
I do. I think weaving takes a very long time. I'll spend, 4 to 6 hours in here very easily in my studio. And it just really, a lot of the times, because a lot of the times I come here coming from another place, coming from work or coming from an event or something, so I have to kind of get myself into some kind of headspace to start working. And so music is a pretty immediate thing that helps me do that. And it could be some kind of calming music. Lately I have, Spotify is a really good friend of mine, and I love Spotify because it will like take all of your musical interests and make little special playlists for you, and it'll call them things like your chill mix or your indie mix or your fun party mix or something, which for me is very nice, because then I can just open it up and click on a playlist, and whatever mood I'm in, it'll just have all the music I like already mixed together. So I do that, but I'm also a big fan of podcasts. I like the Great Women Artists podcast a lot. There's quite a bit. I mean, I'm pretty much interested in anything and everything. There's some really great comedy podcasts if I just need to zone out and laugh a little bit. The Conan O'Brien podcast is really nice. There are several. I think Trevor Noah has a nice podcast that's kind of like deep thinking, really conceptual thinking, and they always interview some really interesting people. So yeah, there's a lot of like entertainment-based listening material, music material. Audiobooks are also really great. Yeah, it's a big mix of a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your studio space here, and how the space helps you get your art done, and how it inspires you to work, or how you use the space. Do you come in here when you're done with stuff? Do you come in early? Are you a late worker? Tell me a little bit about the space and how you use it.
Absolutely. So my studio space here is like a separate structure from my house, but it's on my property. It's essentially in my backyard. So it's not in my house, which is really nice because I can kind of have that separation. And I can come out here. It's very, very close. I'm a super homebody. I love being in my house. I like being home. So having my studio nearby where I don't have to get in the car and drive is really important to me. I work at pretty much any hour that I have time. So if I have a day off, I will be in here all day. If I have a morning off, I will be in here very early in the morning for even for just an hour or two before I have to get on to go to work or go to a meeting or something. And just the opposite of that, after work, I often like come home, relax, have some dinner, and then I just come straight in here and I'll work for an hour or two and chip away at a project. But it is really nice to come in here and have an entire day to kind of just come and go as I please, and check out of everything else and just sort of check in here. But I do treat it like a job, like it's work. So it's kind of clocking in, and when I'm in here, I try not to do anything else and try to compartmentalize, like this is just what I'm doing today. I finished everything I have to do out there. I'm going to be in here now. And I really enjoy this space for that. I can sit in here and read. Sometimes I'm not working at all, like I'm not working on an actual project. Sometimes I'm just reading. Sometimes I'm sketching. I always have a big pile of books and several sketchbooks out. Sometimes I'll look through old sketchbooks. Sometimes I pull out boxes from the loft storage up here and pull out old objects that I've been collecting and just try to see if, what works. And it's always a little bit different, but it's always very productive.
Awesome. When you're getting into your work and you're doing work on the loom, and my wife crochets and does stuff like that, she finds kind of a rhythm to it and is able to block out a whole lot of other things and get kind of hyper-focused. Is that something you find, or can you explain?
Absolutely. I definitely hyper-focus while I'm weaving or while I'm doing anything in here. especially with weaving, it does take quite a bit of mental focus, not just for the pattern making, but just for the process in general. A lot of the times I don't have a solid plan for the pattern that I'm using. I might have an idea, but I like to be able to switch it up if I feel like it in the middle of a pattern or in the middle of a weaving, maybe adding in objects or adding in a different yarn color, or figuring out if I'm going to add something on top of the weaving after it's done, and preparing for that. And so it is a very focused process, and it takes you do kind of have to block everything out and just strictly focus on what you're doing, because it is very easy to kind of skip a number or skip something, and then you kind of see it later and you're like, you have to kind of backtrack, go back and undo what you just did. It's very forgiving in that way as well, but it's a lot better if you can just focus and get it done. Yeah.
We've mentioned color, and a lot of your work seems that you're using what is naturally available. Are you staying with just strictly natural, or when you choose color, what helps you choose and takes you in that direction?
Absolutely. Color comes up in my work kind of seldomly, actually. A lot of the yarns that I use are natural fibers. There's the natural white cotton, but with Sally Fox fiber, she grows these really beautiful browns and siennas and greens, and they're remarkable, and I love really utilizing that palette as much as possible. But every now and again, I'll throw in some red or some, acrylic yarn that I have lying around. I have a lot of yarn that my grandmother gave to me years and years ago. She had just skeins and spools and little rolled balls of yarn that she would use in all of her crafting. And she never threw anything away. So some years ago, she gave me just like trash bags full of yarn and fabric scraps and things. And I washed all of it and dried it all outside in the sun, and it just kind of sits in here in little bags. So if I have any color in my work, it's usually from that bag of like old acrylic yarn from my grandmother. And that's probably the only time you'll see synthetic yarns show up in my work. I'm looking at some of it now, and I do have some red, but it is mostly very natural color yarn.
You mentioned in some of your schooling and stuff like that, are there artists who inspire you or that you research or have done study on that helps guide you or you take inspiration from?
Absolutely. There are lots of artists that inspire me currently and have, since way back. I'd say early on in my college years, I learned about artists like Whitfield Lavelle, African-American artist, who also was kind of mixed media, and he was also working with histories and African-American history as American history, and uses a lot of found objects and was doing a lot of installations. And I was really inspired by his work, and also kind of references old photos and things, historic photos. And then there's also Maria Magdalena Campos Pons. She's Cuban and creates a lot of work based on her Cuban ancestry, and also is a photo-based artist that creates a lot of really lovely mixed media installations. And I like that they both really inspired me to make something immersive that people could walk into and feel as well as see, and still base it in photography. Because there was a point in my practice where I was really trying to figure out how to do that, where the still photo was lovely, but there needed to be something more. And so around that time, it was when I discovered artists like Maria Magdalena Campos Pons and Whitfield Lavelle, and I found their books at like half-price bookstores and stuff, and just really, really inspired me.
How do you feel about people touching your artwork?
You know, people always want to like touch my artwork because it's very tactile.
Right.
It's fabric. It's very crafty. I think weaving, just like crocheting and needlework in general, is very, it's a very humble material. It's very simple. Weaving is an ancient practice. There are indigenous cultures all over the world that have been weaving, and so it's a very approachable medium. So people always kind of reach out and kind of want to like just feel what the fabric, what it feels like. And I work in a museum, and so that's a big no-no. So I always try to train people, like, we're going to look with our eyes, try not to touch anything, but it is really hard, especially with like my family, because it's not going to damage it necessarily. I think everybody's very gentle, nobody's trying to like tug at things, but yeah, my museum brain clicks on as soon as somebody starts reaching, and I just want to immediately tell them not to touch anything. But I didn't always work in a museum, and I remember I had an exhibition in 2016 where I displayed some cotton spurs that were cast in bronze. It was the first time that I had displayed those, and a lot of people were very curious about them, and they because of the level of detail that you're able to get from that process, a lot of people were commenting on how I was probably, like, they looked like they were spray painted. And I was like, no, this is bronze. I cast this in bronze. And so I would grab them. At some point in the opening, I was grabbing one out of one of the little display boxes and like, here, no, you can feel it. To put it in your hand and like feel the metal. That was probably not a good idea, because you really don't want to encourage people to do that.
Well, it's like Kent Olberg likes it when kids climb onto sculptures.
Exactly.
And so he's like, yeah, when you have a wear spot on the where their butt has polished it, I like that, because then the kids are interacting with the animals or whatever I've shown.
Exactly.
But yeah, for the most part, and you can't touch that. Your oils are going to get on it, and you're not. Yeah. Structurally, it's still going to be there, but we can tell where you touched it.
We can tell, right? Yeah. And exactly. I think museums do a fantastic job of preserving objects, but it is really nice when there's an artist who welcomes play and interactive aspects to their pieces, because it makes the public feel a little more comfortable with art pieces, I think.
Tell me a little bit about your bronze work and what kind of directed you in that route.
For sure. So before I started weaving, I started bronze casting, and it kind of was born out of me, again, figuring out how to take my practice a little further past a photographic image. And also, I had been kind of frequenting a lot of antique shops. I like to window shop. I like to browse. I love antique shops. I just like old objects. And I had seen a lot of like these objects that were cast in bronze, either cast or plated in bronze, as sort of a commemoration of an event in someone's life, like the bronze baby shoe kind of concept, like to document your firstborn or something. And I really, really liked that idea of the bronze material being this commemorative material. So you can see a lot of like bronze portrait busts of really important people, or like a big bronze equestrian sculpture, like being a monument to somebody or something. And so the bronze material became really interesting to me, and I thought if I really wanted to commemorate this history of cotton, and even though it is a very violent history and a very complex history, that affects a lot of people of color. It affected my family because it's a big cash crop industry. There was a lot of exploitation involved in terms of the labor. So I'm learning all of this, and how can I was asking myself the question, how can I commemorate and honor that history in a way that shows off the beauty and the strength of it, while also showing off, while also being able to talk about that violence. and address it, because I think people need to know about it. So I researched, how can I bronze cast? Is that something I need to pay someone to do? Is it something that I'm capable of doing? And I was really thankful to find the Southwest School of Art here in San Antonio, which is now part of University of Texas San Antonio. It's the UTSA's Southwest campus. But for years it was the Craft Center, and then it was the Southwest School of Art, sorry. It was the Southwest School of Art, and they did a lot of community classes. So they were a college program where you can go and get a degree, but you could also go as a community member and just take art classes as much as you please. And they also had scholarships offered if you weren't able to pay the whole fee. And so I utilized that quite a bit. I took my first weaving class there, but before that I took a lost wax casting class. And I remember taking the class a couple of extra times, like maybe 3 times, to use the studio. I quickly realized that it is a very technical process, and one class is not going to produce an entire exhibition's worth of material and product, at least not with my level of experience. So I did have to take a few extra classes to use the studio and just kind of continue making the work that I needed. But that process was really mind-blowing. It was like using blow torches and a centrifuge, and it was really intense and very labor intensive, and all of this like work, and you produce one sort of tiny little thing. So I did enjoy that process, but it definitely wasn't something that I wanted to go back to necessarily. So yeah, that's how I got into bronze casting. I kind of just set that down after a couple of projects, though.
Grew up in South Texas, going to get to show there at the Art Museum. What's it mean to you to be able to bring some of your work down to South Texas and to be able to show in that museum?
I'm really excited to show at the Art Museum of South Texas because that's my hometown. My whole family lives there, and it's going to be accessible for them. It's going to be really exciting to kind of share this aspect of my work with them very easily. I've had shows in a lot of different cities, and it's not always really easily and accessible for them to travel. So to have something that's right in their backyard is going to be really awesome. I remember visiting the art museum as a young person, and I remember going on field trips to like the Lexington, and we hang out on the Shoreline Boulevard a lot. Every time I visit, it's just really scenic and really beautiful. I've been sailing out there on the bay a lot as well, and so just being home is going to be really nice, and I'm really looking forward to it. I actually interned at the art museum when I was a student at Del Mar. Yeah, I think Michelle Locke was the director at that point. And I had little tasks like doing the light meter in front of the art pieces and monitoring things like that, and helping with like a student art show. And so I have a lot of memories there.